All right, we are live, and I've got a couple guests coming in, and we're going to even be doing some screen share. So I have Saverio Spagnolie. Am I saying the last name correct, Saverio?
Nailed it.
Perfect, love it. I'm assuming strong Italian name lineage there.
You got it.
I'm German, so who knows? I might mess up pronunciation. Then we have Matt Johnson. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm fine. You, Chief?
Doing great, doing good. Now, let me know. We can start with Saverio. Where are you remoting in from? Kind of give us time and space and where you're at, what you're doing.
I am sitting in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a professor of applied mathematics here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm just getting through the summer, getting work done, spending time with the family, getting a game in now and then.
Love it, love it. What's the most recent thing you played?
I had to clean up Navajo Wars so that I could use this desk. And then last night I tried something new. It's called That Time You Killed Me. I don't know if you've heard of this. It is not a historical war game, but it's historical in some other dimension. So it's okay. Pretty good. It's pretty clever.
All right. I haven't actually, I may have heard of it, but I don't think I've seen anything with that. Is it more of a lighter family game, or am I way off?
Well, yeah, it's a lighter family game, but it's a brain burner. You've got the past, the present, and the future in play at the same time, and you have to, there are knock-on effects if you do something in the past that carry forward in the future. It certainly could be a very interesting mechanic to explore in a historical setting, but this one's just kind of a playful abstract. So but it's very cute. It's very nice.
Got it. I'll have to take a look at that. And Matt, where are you coming from?
Montreal, Quebec. I'm a technical animator in video game industry, formerly Ubisoft. Right now I'm at Electronic Art Studio here in Montreal.
Beautiful. Very nice. Very nice. Excellent. And I've got it down. We're going to talk about, you've got a P500 with GMT and Vijay-Nagara. No? Nagara.
You're there.
Okay. Great. And you explained that this is very clear. You said it's pronounced just like it's written, and it actually stands for?
So Vijaya means victory, and Nagara means city. So it's the city of victory, Vijaya-Nagara.
Vijay-Nagara. Very nice. Now, we'll kind of bounce back and forth, and you can let me know. And I even saw, I think there were 4 different people listed under designers. So why don't we, if you can, break down kind of the game a little bit, and then kind of this design process or how this came about from your guys' perspective.
I don't know if you want to throw the map up, but we have that available at some point.
Absolutely, we can do that right now. Let me fit her in.
The subtitle of the game is The Deccan Empires of Medieval India. So we're back in the 14th century in the Indian subcontinent, and it's a 1 to 3 player affair, but there's a 4th non-playable faction, which is causing a lot of the dynamics it drives a lot of the narrative arc really of history here, which is the Mongol invaders, which are periodically entering through the mountains and causing great headaches for whoever happens to be sitting in the throne in Delhi. And this drives a lot of history, in part because in order to defend against that kind of invasion, the Delhi Sultanate, which is the faction, one of the playable factions, has to maintain a standing army. That requires a lot of funds. You go looking for funds, you look to the south, you see these very appealing, smaller, minor kingdoms, the Hoysalas, the Pandyas, the Kakatiyas, just sitting there, and not nearly as militarily strong as you are with your cavalry. And so from time to time, you'll send a reminder down to the south to say, remember what we decided you would pay me every year. During this period of history, the Delhi Sultanate tended not to stay permanently in the south. So it would just come and knock on the door if you forgot to send some money. And maybe that would be how the tributary relationship developed for that century. As you can imagine, not everyone was excited about this relationship. And so you have what seems to be just a standard fundamental feature of world history, which is that when the taxer is sufficiently far away, the taxee decides they'd like to form a new entity and kingdom.
Right.
And so in this game, the Vijayanagara Empire is one of the other 3 factions which can be played. And This will go on. This faction, this is essentially the birth story of this faction, which is why the game is so named. This faction will go on to be have a huge footprint in subcontinent India for about 300 years, and it is sprawling. The city's gigantic. It's got 500,000 people. The central city. It is the second largest city behind Beijing for over 100 years.
Right.
And then the third playable faction is the Bahmani Kingdom, which is a breakaway faction from the Delhi Sultanate. One of the critical drivers of history was that the Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the Sultan in Delhi, decided that in order to be closer to the south, to be able to reach into the south more comfortably, because this Vindhya range, this kind of mountainous range here, makes it quite difficult to just walk straight down and do what you'd like to do, decided to move the capital to Devagiri, renamed it Daulatabad. And this was, it turned out to be a disaster of epic proportions. It upset a lot of the elite nobles who had generations of controlling their own parts of Delhi. But the Sultan forced everyone to move with him. 10 years later, he changes his mind and moves back. And this is one of the reasons why a number of the elite nobles decide that they would like to break away. And this is the third faction of the game, the Bahmani Kingdom, which is formed out of the Delhi Sultanate in that way.
And this system is called the first in the ICS, or what's known as the Irregular Conflict Series. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Matt,
yeah, I can take that one. Coin system is a well-known system. With ICS, I think GMT gave us the opportunity to take the coin system and adapt it to whatever we needed to adapt. We didn't have to follow the strict guideline of this is the coin system. We could basically say, hey, here we need to bend a little because for the historical narrative reason, gameplay reasons. And that's how ICS came to be. Eventually, as we'll see more volumes in the ICS, I expect even more divergence of gameplay, especially stuff like the upcoming Cross Bronx Expressway.
Right.
You're really starting to see like the coin system basically explode into a lot of different things. But here, we're still pretty much in coin territory. Pretty much in coin territory.
Excellent. Let's see, we have every once in a while, I'll just pop in comments as they come in. So any viewers, if you have questions, feel free to ask. I may come back later and try to do them in a batch, but Joe says hi from humid Floral Park, New York, and he's had his eye on this game for quite a while. Where are you guys at in the P500 right now?
We're in a good spot. I think this is almost final art. Okay, it's almost final art. The cards, the map. We need a logo above the sequence of play. The logo is being worked on right now. There's a few cards missing art, not a lot. It's the rule book is almost all written. Like you see the player aid sheet. That's it. So it's we need the box art. Few details that are with GMT right now, a couple of layout things, but it's pretty much in the end of GMT right now. Rule-wise, it's all locked. It's been play tested back and forth for like 100 times, probably more at this point. So yeah.
What are your current numbers at? Do you guys know, or have you looked recently as far as the number of pre-backers?
775, 780 must be around there.
Got it. And I've seen, so that's what you were saying, is People Power is an ICS as well. Is that right? No.
People Power.
Bronx. That's right. Bronx is the next one. Number 2, I think they call it. Right?
Bronx is number 3.
Bronx is number 3.
Number two will be another deeply familiar historical setting in the forest of Nottingham with Fred Serval's A Jest of Robin Hood. A shared design goal for both Vijayanagara and a Jest of Robin Hood anyway was certainly an attempt to provide a smoother on-ramp into the kind of coin or coin-adjacent universe. So these are attempts at maybe streamlining the system a bit more to provide a bit more accessible entry.
Got it. Now, for those that don't know, and I know most will, coin is counterinsurgency. And there is a lot of machinations coming around in coin. So how does ICS simplify things or take it in a different direction?
So at least in this game, and every game is going to be, I think, different, fairly irregular series, really.
Okay.
But in our particular setting, one of the simplifications is that when we are going through the deck, we're going through one card at a time. You're only seeing one card rather than what is common in many other coin settings, which is two. There is a resource and points track at the top of the board as usual, but unlike in some other coin settings, whoever has the most points, whichever faction has the most points at the end of the game wins. Ties are broken by resources, so that's a little bit of a simplification. Okay. The commands and decrees, which are like the operations and special activities, can be taken in either order. Any command goes with any decree. So in some sense, and people differ in their opinions about whether that's a streamlining or not, but we feel like that is probably for us a smoother experience. And the playtime. So this game is compared to coin games, this is a short game. So you can get a couple in an evening if that's what you want to do. That also helps, I think.
Well, I think when I read the bio, it said there's more. Is there more player interaction, or does it just happen quicker, or is there things that I'm doing on your turn as well based on your actions?
Well, it depends if you get like a Mongol invader, but mostly it's like Quain, except that you skip less turns because in Quain, it's going to happen, oh, I'm ineligible. You're much less ineligible in that game. Okay. 2/3 of the events have that we can see on the screen that stay eligible right below the title. So that's a huge difference. Almost every time players are eligible in this game. Streamlining is done in multiple ways. In Quains, you have command and decrees, which often have do this or that, and if that, we try to really have it as a one shot. It's this. So, and yeah, because we can use everything with everything, in a way, it opens the strategy spectrum. In some ways, it makes it maybe harder because, okay, am I going to rebel with conspire? Am I going to rebel with trade? Am I going to rally with build? But you can also do everything. And one of the biggest streamlining also is that, in Quain, you have those interface or whatever, which are like, okay, redeploy this, that. And every time, a new player comes into a game, let's say Falling Sky, oh, geez, it's winter. Caesar's screwed, because the player didn't know like that whole full page of things that he needs to anticipate to win the game at the coup round. For us, it's super simple. It's on the deck of card. You're going to flip that card. And the rule of what you need to do for that coup round, we call it succession, is basically written right there. It's one action per faction. There you go. Poof, 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 poof. You do it, it's finished. So you don't have to go back to, my player aid sheet to follow the whole coup round. So we really cut a lot of complexity here for new players.
And you'll also notice something which you're also not going to find in many coin games, which is, I think, hopefully still a subtle but very useful use of iconography. So, I mean, you can tell here that we've used the flags to indicate the factions, and then we have, cavalry, resources, and then the moon and the sun correspond to Deccan influence, which is a different axis on which the two rebelling factions in the south are engaging in either economic or military spectrum.
Marcus came in real quick and said he went and took a look. Orders are currently at 784.
Very precise. Thank you, Marcus.
Yes, and Tom Bien said, hi, Chief and designers. The game looks really nice. Can it be played from 1, 2, or 3, basically, or is it just a 3-player game?
Tom Bien, we put a lot of effort, thanks for the question, into a solo system in the same vein as the Arjuna system in Gandhi and the Truong system for Fire in the Lake. But for us, I think we're able to even further streamline that system. Each faction comes with a bot but the bot is just this page. That's it.
That's
and
it.
and 4 cards.
Which,
So
if you know a
it's-
bot from the coin game, it's like 4 or 5 player aid sheet. We have 1 per bot. So
Nice.
So if your friend has to leave early, they disappear, but they were the Delhi Sultanate, fine. You pull out the bot, and when it's the bot's turn, on the top of this one sheet, it'll walk you through whether or not that faction is going to take a limited command or a full command and decree, etc. But it's very, I think it's pretty easy to absorb. And then after that, it's just going to decide which command and decree, walking through the next card in the sequence, which is just a couple of quick checks on the map. You're not looking ahead to see what could happen. It's very direct. Are there 3 Mongol invaders on the map? If so, continue, etc. And then space selection follows the, I think it's now called the Jacquard system, the kind of overarching GMT1 solution to these bots. But it's kind of, that process is congealing into a kind of more systematic approach. But we follow through here. So if you need to select a space, if it's to place troops, you just walk down Delhi first. Great. Delhi is going to need some troops and so on. So it's actually, it takes half a game to get used to it. And then after that, I think it's very fluid. And that allows for play as 2 players with 1 bot or 1 player with 2 bots. And we had, that took a lot of play testing. I will tell you, and we've had some just phenomenal play testers when we had finished balancing, tweaking, designing everything so that you could, as a solo player, have 2 bots and it would be a nice, challenging, interesting experience that maintained the narrative arc. And that was really critical because it's all about the story. You have to have the story. I needed to see the history playing out in a particular way, or some distribution of possible histories playing out. And that all got done. And then we had 2 players sit in with 1 bot, and it exploded. So we had to go back and rework a lot of things to try so that it is a kind of a balanced narrative experience for any number of players. It was a lot of work, but we're pretty pleased with it.
it is an extremely tight game. Like, even at players versus players, yes, there's different strategies, but it's tight. Like, an action matters. You never feel like, no, an action matters. So the bots had to be very careful, and you can mix and match them however you want, which was a big challenge. Am I playing solo against this and that bot? Am I playing 2 players and just 1 bot playing in? All this variation was tricky to adjust, but I think Saverio did an amazing job on that one with the help of the playtesters.
Now, you also have a gorgeous map here. Who's your artist?
He's down there.
Ah, you are the artist. Matt is the artist.
Yeah, I did the map, I did the player aid sheet, I did the cards, I did the tokens. GMT is going to take care of the box, the logo, and a couple of images because I am not, I cannot really hand draw characters. I'm not a graphic artist by trade, right? So yeah, and the back of the cards. So GMT is going to take care of a couple things, which they have people that are much better than me at. But yeah, I did the art.
Beautiful. Your coastline delineation, as it kind of turns a little bit of seafoam kind of blue there, it just really draws the eye.
Well, thanks.
Very nice.
I love it.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Every time Matt comes with something new, I get very excited. So.
What was your biggest challenge with the map?
In terms of gameplay or colors?
Really, whichever. Probably more gameplay, because I know, you've got to convey a lot of information easily, cleanly, and quickly, and you've done it while still being stunning and gorgeous. So, was it working in some of these boxes off to the left, or was it literally the information that you've got conveyed in your different locations?
There certainly were no such borders as these during the 14th century.
Of course.
Right.
And so a lot of those were in service to gameplay, with an attempt to try to, allow for historical narratives to play out given their choices.
Because a little bit of history here, like at this time in India, nobody tells you this is the border, right? It's basically dynasties everywhere, and they shift every 10 years. Somebody kick somebody's ass, and whoops, take the place, and that's my new border. There was no defined region with a name. It was actually dynasty names.
But you'll notice that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mathieu.
No, go.
I was just going to say that each province we've organized into provinces, and you'll see there's a number, either 1 or 2, and that corresponds to an economic prosperity essentially offered. And more often than not, you'll see those highly prosperous regions which are on the western coast or off in Bengal, and this is related, as you might imagine, to trade possibilities through ports to Central Asia and critical access to war horses and cavalry and other such equipment. So that certainly has a very substantial effect on the game and on history. These are more hotly contested regions. Some of the borders are very natural. This Raichur Doab is this very lush, fertile region between the Tungabhadra and the Krishna rivers. This fertile region was contested not only between the Bahmani kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire, but by previous kingdoms before them for centuries. It's just a very appealing location. So that there is a border here makes a lot of thematic sense and kind of modeling sense.
A little neat trick.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, a little neat trick we use are you see the cities there, like Devagiri, Gulbarga, Vijayanagara. These are cities, and we use them as junction point, or crossroads, but that can be used for events. Example, I can have an event that say adjacent to Devagiri. That encompass the 4 regions around Devagiri. So it allowed us to, instead of having on one event card, in Gujarat, Malwa, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, they have the card, no, adjacent to Devagiri. And this way, we're able to stay historically through, because it's something that happened in Devagiri, while exploding a bit the gameplay around it instead of just there. So that was a little trick we use.
And also in service to streamlining, because that kind of smooths out, in addition to opening doors to strategic possibilities and depth, it's simpler than a lot of other possibilities could have been. So,
very nice. Now, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say each province starts the game in a tributary relationship to the Sultanate. And that is what the Sultan is trying to achieve. Maybe I didn't say that in the game. The Sultan wants to maintain as much of the tributary provinces as possible.
Okay.
Historically, the Sultanate is going to be crumbling over the course of the next century, and this is going to pull back the shadow across southern India and allow for these other kingdoms to emerge. But essentially, so the Delhi Sultanate's job in this game is to lose the country slower than it did historically. It's a very difficult job.
Which can hurt a bit of players at first, because when you're playing the Delhi Sultanate, you're basically starting the game with your full points. You only can lose points. So if you're not the type of player to be okay with that, there's a warning in the rulebook. If you play the Sultan, know that you're already starting the game at your apogee. You're already starting the game maxed out, and you have to defend from there.
It's difficult to decide how much effort do I want to put into defending from Mongol raids, how much effort do I want to extend myself down south. If the Mongols attack Delhi, I'm going to need to call back troops very rapidly. That's a hard balance to get on your first play, but it's also nice that you can own the game, be the person who's actually read every bit of the rules, and then bring 2 people over who have not invested quite as much time as you have, and you can put yourself in the hot seat, and everybody can essentially still have a balanced experience in that sense, which is a feature, I think.
And that relationship, Delhi is basically like Caesar in Falling Sky, There's a step up in terms of difficulty when you play Caesar in Falling Sky compared to the Belgate. It's obvious, You have kind of that same relationship here. Delhi is a much more complex faction.
Now, what was the genesis of this idea, this era, this 100 years? Where did this come from?
This game emerged from the first Consim Game Jam, which way back in the beginning of the pandemic, 3 decades ago, was a 72-hour experiment where designers just jumped in and we were given a prompt, and the prompt was to recycle a coin game. And at the time, I had Gandhi sitting on the table, and I thought, boy, that's a lovely map and a lovely presentation, but I wonder, and I just, India's got such an enormous history. Maybe we can add to that there. And so then it was just a matter of considering all the possible factions of Vijayanagara Empire, again being one of the most prominent um, cities in the world for 100 years, and most people have never heard of it, and that I know, and even like Indian postdocs and graduate students that I talk to and work with know very, very little about it. And so that just seemed like an obvious entry point to let's go as Volko likes to say, let's go on a kind of a time tourism. Let's and also it was COVID, so we wanted to get out of this location and out of this time period. So we got the hell out of here. We went back to the 14th century. But just seeing those factions emerge, these three factions, everything just kind of worked narratively and for gameplay, and it was an exciting thing to try to tackle.
So you had a team working from your perspective in the middle of this project right from the get-go, or was it just you? Or it was someone, Matt?
It was the four designers on the box. So it was me, Mathieu, Corey Graham, and Aman Matthews. We composed that team. And then after that 3-day period, then it was having done well in that contest, GMT became interested in going further with the project. And then we had to decide, okay, do we really want to do this? Now it's an actual, now it's going to be a serious thing. At that point, we brought on Joe Dewhurst, who was a fantastic developer, and he's been great to work with. And then we've just benefited from this incredible constellation of GMT folks who are really pleasant, really smart, and really invested. And so just the development process and working with people like Jason Carr and just having people like Morgaine and Volko and Bruce Mansfield just kind of out there and available to interact has been so fun and so useful.
All the players on the Coin Discord. I mean, this game is your game as much as ours at this point. The play test, the comments, the discussions, everything. I mean, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a really cool story. I didn't know where it had come from. Were any other folks in that same kind of brainstorming competition? Anything else come out of that at the same time where you guys were like, wow, that's awesome too?
There were a couple that have been picked up by GMT that are, at least one of them is up on P500 now, called, is it In the Shadows? Did I get that right? Okay. And that's by Ken Bullock and Joe Schmidt. And that's covering kind of resistance era France, World War II. The artwork in that game is just stunning. So that's definitely worth taking a look at. I think there's one more that maybe is getting picked up at some point, but there were just a lot of really fun designs. I think David Thompson did something with his daughter using the All Bridges Burning map, but it was like Coin for Kids, and they had some historical or mythical dragon moving around and ancient
Rebellion Britannia from the last 500 is a spin-off that started with Pendragon as an expansion to Pendragon, and then or something like that, and then became its own thing with a newer, even more adjacent to Coin. I don't even know if it's Coin anymore. System.
And I'm sorry, I think I forgot also. Chris Bennett was on the In the Shadows project as well. That also came out of so Joe Schmidt and Dan Bullocks and Chris.
Beautiful. Well, that is interesting. So, because I had assumed when I just kind of first looked at the project, I'm like, somebody has a doctorate just in like Indian history or the lineage. Is it Matt? No. We need to start here. This was an idea. This was a game for a game jam. But honestly, between you and me here, the design started after the game jam. Because that's like, okay, let's get the books. Saverio had contacts at university that works in the Indian history department. Let's talk to them. And Saverio read all those books, and internet, and we put things together, and we talked to Indian people. We even have an art historian on the current period right now, which is evaluating the art. Is it okay? And we're still willing to adjust if we need to do all that. And we learned so much by doing it. And that's why the development was also designed for us. And we took so long and we put so many hours since the game jam
doing the game, redoing the game, redoing the game. This is nothing like what was at the Game Jam. Nothing. It's a new thing, and we learned.
Now, I've had a lot of games lead me to read more on the subject after I've fallen in love with a game. So are there a couple books possibly that you could even reference that would say, this was one that was just, phenomenal? Let me bring you up.
This is India and the Persian Age by Dick Eaton, who's a University of Arizona professor. And this book, more than most, is going to contain this period of history, in addition to some of the eras before and after the game are over. But this is a fantastic book. And it's just so bizarre. I was in the math department 2 days ago, and I saw a graduate student in number theory reading this book. And I'd never seen it out in the wild, but that was cool. This one is this is more of a kind of like a popular historical writing. So this is even easier than Eaton's to get into. It's very it's well written. It's exciting. So there's another. I have more.
Sure.
Lords of the Deccan. Lords of the Deccan.
Anirudh Kanisetti. So this has done really well recently. This came out not so long ago. This is actually about the period, maybe 200 years before the time period of our game, but you still get a lot of important lead-in ideas, and it's just well written. It's a very exciting book, and there are more.
Something we discovered as we explored this period of history is that India in Persianate age is still a very political thing even today, because of religions, because of culture. Like, I mean, the Delhi Sultanate was it was an invader. It was a Persianate invader. So there's that political thing going on even today. But like new authors, like the guys that wrote Rebel Sultans, which are Indian writer, and Lords of the Deccan, they have that interesting and newer perspective, which probably Eden have too, that it was not as much as a religion contest back then. It was a contextual situation. And that was, for me, the biggest challenge in portraying this time in history. We don't want it to be just a singular, destructive narrative. Oh, this guy bashed this guy. No. And I hope this reflects in the strategy how we open the door to different ways. How were these cultures like intermingling? Because you have the Vijayanagara Hindu Empire at the bottom, then the Persian coming in. But then you have the Bahmani kingdom in between, which started as Delhi Sultanate because they are a breakaway faction, but eventually they mingled with the Southern Hindu. At one point, it was not like a culture or religion war; it was really just a politic. Like people wanted power, and I mean it's just I'm going sideways here. A lot of new perspective about this period in time because there's still political ripples up to today.
Right.
We got invaded X years ago. It's their fault. They're still talking about we should destroy this mosque or that temple. But I think if we read stuff by Canicetti, by Pillai, we start to understand a new perspective of that period. And I think that was the most, to me, and I think to many people we worked with, most important thing to insert in the narrative. How this is a thing about political conflict and that everything else is basically contextual, like to this. We were very sensitive about it.
Right. And that's been really one of the most interesting things, first, of even seeing how coins started to take on topics that, I'd be talking with buddies and I'd be like, how can there be a game on that? And now we're into, the irregular strategies, your series, and the idea that there can be a game on this, which honestly, you were filling me in on information I don't know. And then that drives a lot of folks to, man, I've got to try that. And then that's why I reference the books, because historical wargaming is such a good way to get in and kind of feel and experience the history, not just read about it, but then to jump into it. And that's why these systems are just, I think that's one of the reasons they're taking off, is they're really fitting in places where historical wargaming didn't go, or historical gaming didn't go.
You can you can pull the lens very far with these system and show a situation from bird's eye view, you know, like from, you don't have, it's not tactical really. It's not a tactical system. It's the other layer wider than this.
Right.
And but there's still some constraint. Like, for example, we don't have helicopters. We cannot just, factions cannot pop everywhere. Like a turn is 5 years. So slowly migrating, slowly taking territory. We still have to include that when you consider the scale of the game. Like, of course, in a smaller game like Algeria, Colonial Twilight, you know, like you can pop left, you can pop right, put a piece everywhere. Like, we can't really do that. We had to and that goes when we discussed the map before. We had to consider that the movements of those empires, you cannot put pieces everywhere. You had to kind of have we have to make sense, right? We have to make sense. There's no helicopters here. There's no
right.
I think maybe something that I'm hearing both of you describing, which is a really central part of a lot of these games, which I became so fascinated by a few years ago, was just that they all represent a model. And that somehow was, it shouldn't have been maybe, but it was kind of a revelation. It's like, oh, there really is a model here. The options that the different factions have at their disposal and what they're all trying to achieve is historical, but then how they play out and how they interact together, you're just looking at a complex system. And I love this in a different part of my life, where I think about how natural laws and patterns and shapes and nature emerge from very simple rules. But the same is true in this historical setting. You set up a couple of simple rules that are relevant to those factions, and then there's a whole distribution of how history may have played out. And that's where these games offer such an interesting perspective on history, because it's interactive and you get a better feel for, did it have to go that way? How likely was it for it to have gone that way? What if a couple things had changed? Would it more or less have been the same, or what could it have been dramatically different? And so that, I think, is just a wonderful part of this art form.
One thing.
Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
One thing we struggled with is, weirdly enough, some stuff we're stuck with the Quain system. An example in Quain, one of those octagonal, hexagonal piece is a guerrilla, is a unit.
Okay.
Like, for us, we're talking a piece like that is 10,000 people. Like, these are small kingdoms. This is not guerrilla warfare. Like, every emir, or like blue hexagon in that case, is a leader with his own little dynasty. And some people play the game and like, oh, this is a guerrilla piece. And we're like, no, not in this game. We're talking 10,000 people here. But to give the player that sense of scale is a challenge, because we're stuck with what Quain is.
And that's what I was exactly going to ask, is in the development process, what were some of the challenges that you ran up into? And so, interesting. What, so working with GMT, I want to get behind the scene, maybe not so much on the game. What was maybe the most interesting, or the epiphany that came along with working just with GMT on that professional level? Something in development or something behind the scenes? Is there anything that not ticks off like makes mad, but like an idea that was like, man, that's a whole interesting behind the curtain kind of thing?
I think I tried to nudge this earlier, but I think just the commitment to development and quality. I mean, this is now looking back over a year and a half, but this is exactly what you want. But we had a game that we thought was great. Everything seemed to be working, and you get someone to come in and just give you a pretty good whack. Like, no, this is not good enough. In a way that, I mean, it's super constructive. Like, everyone's really friendly, but they're going to give you a very honest and useful, detailed, critical feedback. Right. And then you go back to work for another N months, and you come back out and you say, well, now we've got it. And you play it, you get some perspectives, and you go back to work, and over and over and over again. So I've heard, and this is our first published game, so I don't have the experience to say otherwise. But I've heard other people say that not all companies offer that degree of depth of development and feedback. So that's been it's an ecosystem. It's really cool.
And I think me and Saverio are a bit crazy here. Like we talked earlier, this game was not designed after the game jam. It got designed. It got designed after the game jam, and we were willing to ditch in the hours to say, okay, no, remove this and put this and remove this and put this and remove this. Iterations over iterations. Somebody came up with a different strategy or way to play the game. An historian came up with oh yeah, by the way, this. Okay, it's X amount of hours to redo that part. We'll redo it. For a year, we did those iteration, learned the history. Playtesting happened. Playtesting started over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this game is totally different. There was no cavalry at the beginning of playtesting, and this game it's a procedural design way or iterative design strategy we used. Okay. It took us a bit longer, but I think in the end, it's a product I'm really proud of right now.
Definitely. Well, that's very enlightening, because I have heard from some folks, different companies, where they're kind of developing of their game is kind of still on them. And they may have skills in that, they may not. Sometimes some of the marketing is even on them. And I know just from my side of doing things with GMT and having Jason Carr on the show, and that level of playtesting they do, because there's nothing better than constructive criticism coming back to you. I work for the police department, but if we're in a tense situation, there can be a tactical review after the situation, and someone will say, when you were going in the building, you should have cut that corner tighter because you could have been shot as you were moving through there. And there's no mincing of words, because we're not trying to make anybody feel bad. We're just trying to make sure things go better. So, and that's where I know GMT, with their professional level development, that's exactly what I was curious about.
Going back to our developer, Joe Dewhurst here, maybe 4, 5, 6 months in the design, came in and says, yeah, but maybe the faction should have a non-violent way to increase the influence track, which we talk about. And we're like, you know what, Joe, that makes sense. And at the same time, we were learning from these new authors like Pillai and Canicetti, and we're like, you know what? We need that. We need a non-violent way to win in this game. So how many things we erased and then redo because we wanted to have that narrative in. And that's an idea that came from Joe Dewhurst, our developer, which is a GMT guy,
Very nice. I'm going to answer St. Louis Keith's question. So the way P500 campaigns work is they actually keep that P500 open, and people will jump in. And a lot of folks will jump in early in order to get that game above that P500, because then it's going to get made, or usually going to get made. And then as the game progresses, GMT is real good about letting you know we're in the art development phase, or we're in production phase, or it's shipping. And then they will even put out a notice there, Keith, that, hey, this is going to be arriving. And once it starts to ship, then the P500 price is cheaper or less expensive than what the final price is. So a lot of folks jump in at the kind of near the finish line and decide, yep, I'm going to get that. And so that's how that P500 works, Keith. It kind of picks up steam and momentum the closer it gets to finally being shipped out.
I think the P500 is going to stay up until shipping. And then at some point they say, okay, we're shipping, we're locking the 500.
Yep. I think it's once it starts to leave the warehouse and being shipped, I think that's where it reverts over to the full retail price. And then Marcus has a good question, just kind of fleshing out kind of what you guys like. Marcus tuned in a bit late, so maybe this was touched on. It hasn't been, but if you had to quickly name your top 3 board games, what would they be? We can start with Matt.
Definitely, 100%, no doubt. the Dune Classic, the original 6 players,
Ah,
asymmetric conflict game. This is my best game. That's it. And after that, I think I'm going to say Fire in the Lake and or Root, possibly.
really nice.
Yeah, these are my types of games. And then also, I don't know if it's really board games, but I think RPGs. I play a lot of RPGs, and this is something I like to use or for the systems, for the player interaction. I love how I think that tabletop RPG bring a lot to board games.
What's your favorite RPG?
Well, I played a lot. My favorite, I mean, it depends on the setting. For rules, I think I'm more into narrative RPGs right now. I don't like crunchy numbers, +1, +2. No, give me a narrative thing. I like I like the new One Ring Second Ed system is quite interesting.
So that's Free League's game.
Yeah, I even liked Fantasy Flight. Their Star Wars line was quite good, though a bit crunchy. Their Legend of the Five Ring I thought was a clever, though a little bit convoluted fiddly system, but was really clever in some way. Blades in the Dark, I think, is something that changed the RPG world. And yeah, stuff like that.
Do you use the Fate system at all?
Nope, never used this one.
Okay, got it. All right, and Saverio.
That is such a difficult question. What a difficult question. But if I have to answer, and I do, I will pull out of the grab bag. I think Maria is wonderful. Sekigahara, I think, is wonderful, and that one has a special spot for me because it's the first game that I played after a hiatus of some decades that really launched me in this direction of kind of fascination with historical board games.
Nice.
And then I'll cheat on the third one. More than any other game I've played, it's been chess. But since that feels like it should have an asterisk by it, and this I wouldn't necessarily say this is my top 3 board game, just because I've only played it once, and I don't think I'll play it again.
Okay.
But it left such an impression that I am so impressed with how the art form can be used. Was a recent one. It was Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms. By David Thompson, and I just it took me a long time to work up the courage to even get in there on that subject and content. And then I finally found the time to do it, and I wanted to do it kind of in a way that I felt was I don't know, respectful or appropriate or something. And then I went through it as an interactive experience, and it just I was just again so impressed at the where he was able to take you with some mechanics choices and just presentation, and I don't think I want to play it again, honestly, but it really left a mark. So notable.
And my gaming, probably I started when I was 13. Very first game I got was B-17 Queen of the Skies from Avalon Hill. I've even done some playthrough stuff here with the channel where I was running it through, and it's interesting. I'd figured out. Well, I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, and I subscribed to the general, but there was none of this greater world going on. So I felt like I was the only one playing these more hardcore, board games. And so B-17 Queen of the Skies, I mean, probably thousands of hours playing. And then I got right into Ambush, John Butterfield's game, Eric Lee Smith. And again, to find those two as my first and second games was just a stroke of luck. And then as I got into my 20s, I was in the Army, and then I was going to school, and then I was on the police department. So I had this lull of no gaming, really. I was doing some online gaming, did some RPGs when I was young too, and then got into the German games coming over, and was at BGG Con, and actually saw Uwe's game from Academy Games, Conflict of Heroes, on the table. I'd always liked tactical wargaming, and the just production values were so stunning. I was like, wow, these counters are huge. These maps are almost photorealistic. This is gorgeous. So that's the one where that's my favorite, probably more current modern game. And then much like Matt, I liked role playing. I wasn't back into it yet. And my son, as he got older, started to enjoy role playing games more than board games. And we just started to gravitate towards, he'd created a game idea, and he was like, he was trying to make up rules. And I'm like, why don't we take the fate system, and it's very flexible, and you can do this. He had a character doing parkour stuff and different things.
So cool right now about RPG. So cool. I used to be D&D. Okay, I have a better sword. I kill a better monster. It's not that anymore. It's so much more wide and fresh.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why I've really gravitated towards these games, like the coin system games, is that there's some overlap with role playing. And I think somehow if you just put yourself really into the faction that you're running, for me personally, I can play a game and I can get crushed and not be bothered at all. It's just not about the winning and losing. It's about a shared storytelling and historical narrative arc. And so I think the role playing is somehow embedded in these games, which also include negotiation. That's part of why it gets into the more role playing features, I think.
No,
every time we lost ourselves in the design or anything, we always went back to that one thing. This is a game about story, narrative. This is this type of game. It's not a tactical game. It's a story, narrative, historical. Yes, there's a conflict. Yes, there's rules. But always come back to what are we writing about here? Always came back to that.
No, that's great. Very similar to what I do even when I'm reading. If I'm reading, historically, I'm always trying to put myself, what would I have done if I was, in Poland in 39, or, how would it have felt knowing that Russia is coming in on one side and Germany on the other, and your allies are coming in, but they're not going to get, so that all those feelings. And that is what I find unbelievably intriguing and entertaining and educational with games like what you've designed here.
Absolutely.
When you talk about a tactical game, there are decisions you take. Am I going left? Am I going right? Am I shooting? Am I not shooting yet? For us, the decision, or for Quain in general, had to be. Again, the lens is back further, and this was a difficult thing to nail. Like, what type of decision space are we putting the player in? Because you don't want to shoehorn the player into, well, this is your strategy. This is what they did historically. This is what you have to do. No, we wanted to stretch it just enough that the player had agency, allowed the gamers to basically feel like they were in control of how the situation. And this goes back to, we have non-violent way to win the game, violent way to win the game, economic way to win the game. We're not going to go into all the victory conditions here and ways to make points, but we wanted to have all these systems almost equally effective, so that in a way you can play a game and say, oh my God, I won because I had so much resources. Okay, cool. You think it's the only strategy, or is it contextual to the situation of that game? Maybe next game, no, you're going to have more military power, cavalry, and that's how you're going to win. And that balancing edge act of having all those strategies being viable, contextual, and that was a really fun thing to do.
And that mattered a lot to us, is that storytelling. As you were saying, you want to put yourself there, and we just, you need to match the mechanics in the game and the choices that you're making with those feelings. And that was kind of the, if you're playing as the Delhi Sultanate, it really feels, as the player, this very difficult balancing act between, I've got Mongols coming in, this is a real problem, but I need to reach south and I'm having difficulties down there. And you can really kind of imagine some of the challenging types of decisions that the Sultan would have been sitting with at the same time, balancing all of the elite nobles in Delhi and things. And the Bahmani kingdom, meanwhile, is they're trying to break away, but they're not as strong as the Delhi Sultanate, so they need to do so carefully. And that all these pieces in the game, the emirs, these local rulers, are either in their obedient state, ostensibly paying their tributes, not a threat to the Sultan, or they may be in a rebelling state. And this can change when they either choose to throw off their tributary chains or attack the Sultan or something, and then now they can be attacked by the Sultanate. So there's this balance of the Bahmani kingdom of conspiring with the governors of Delhi at the right time, quietly. You know, and imagine you're trying to have a breakaway faction. You can't be too obvious about it. Or you better be strong before you do make it obvious. And then the Vijayanagara Empire is enormous. They have the most rajas or rulers or pieces available to them in the game, the most allies that can come from other minor kingdoms. And so eventually the Vijayanagara Empire is just going to grow upward, huge, and hopefully feel the benefit of having that kind of population. And
now we've covered this a little bit, but it's a perfect time as we get ready to close to bring up Tambien's question here. So are the three factions easy to play, or is there one that is more like a beginner one? And I know we've covered some of this, but if you could just kind of address that again, or some of your perspectives.
Both the Delhi Sultanate and the Bahmani Kingdom have two front engagements to deal with. The Delhi Sultanate has the Mongols to the northwest and the Bahmani Kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire to the south. The Bahmanis have the Delhi Sultanate pushing on them from the north and this other upstart kingdom to the south, so that's difficult to balance. Vijayanagara, at least topologically, only has one direction that they're concerned about. So in that sense, it may be a little simpler, but they may need to be just adjust their strategies accordingly to try to maybe puncture through or pick a direction. And do you want to spread out? How quickly? Is it, you can spread yourself too thin? But Vijayanagara Empire may be ever so slightly easier to navigate than the Bahmani Kingdom, and the Bahmani Kingdom is slightly easier to navigate than the Delhi Sultanate.
Anything to add, Matt?
There's a cool little battle system we haven't talked about, but it's a little bit influenced by Root. It's very simple, and I think if you like kind of more of those, it's not really random. It looks random, but it's not. We have a system that is very controlled random, easy to run. You don't need to look at 500 pages of modifiers. This is like basically like Root, a one roll and done, poof poof. So that's kind of cool if you're looking for something with a little bit more random in the battle, because Quain is known for its remove one piece for one piece and this and that. We have a little random to that, a little non-deterministic to that. Yeah, I think it's worth to mention if you like to roll dice and a bit like Root, then this is also a game that can interest you for that.
You bet. Anything either of you want to add before we close?
It's been one of the best parts of the last 2 years watching people play this and have fun with it and learn new history and laugh and curse at each other. And we can't wait to see it out on tables. And I'm really appreciative of you having us on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. When Jason got a hold of me, he said, hey, he's been on the show and we talked about all his work with GMT1. And so when he's kind of excited about something, he'll throw me an email, hey, and I'm like, absolutely. So I've always told Jason, again, that's, I think, part of GMT is he's excited about what you guys are working on as well.
Well, we wouldn't be here without Jason. I mean,
yep.
He was part of the jury of the game jam. He saw us and talked to us on the Quain Discord. How many times, I mean, this game is, it's definitely under the umbrella of Jason Carr as the main developer of the series here.
Nice. Well, thank you. No other questions have come in, so we've covered the questions as they popped in. So we'll go ahead and close. We're almost right at an hour, which is perfect, and hopefully, so I'll make a note. Anybody that has seen this and is very interested, again, just go to GMT, go to gmt.com, or you can even put in GMT P500, and you'll get right into that P500. You can scroll through there. You'll see the game. You'll see tons of games. They've got a lot of games in their P500, but that's where you can go and you can pre-order. It's basically a pre-order system, and you get a slight break on the price. I don't know what that is right now. Do you guys know off the top of your head?
I don't.
Me neither. I know, and I should have looked it up, but you can tell because I can't tell. They will discount the prices, slightly discounted for those that get in and back early. So if you're interested, go there and check out GMT. And if you don't know about the P500 list, you will get lost there and probably back multiple games. So it's a pleasure having both of you on. Anytime you want to come on, or even after the game comes out. I know we've still got some shipping issues, and hopefully we're past some of the slowdowns with some of the manufacturing and the log jams that have come out. Have they? Is there any kind of? I know it's. I shouldn't even bring it up. Is there any kind of idea in? When do you think it would actually be shipping? Have they given you anything, or is that way too optimistic?
We're just really waiting in the queue for some box art, and then I mean we're very close, but I don't think we can give specific details.
I know, and with all the shipping problems and container issues and stuff. So perfect. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Stay on the line here. I'm going to go ahead and click us out, and I appreciate everybody that's tuned in and asked questions.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.